I'd like to spend the next, perhaps the next, 20 minutes or so to discuss Water Unite Impact. That's an investment vehicle that we have built to answer those issues around water, water scarcity, other problems around water. And this will be done in three parts, which you can see on the next page. The three parts, first we talk about a little bit about Water Unite, why we're here, our raison d'etre, what we're trying to do. Two, I want to talk about the blended finance model that we have built. And finally, we'll open the lens to discuss about, investing in a water gap and discuss a number of innovations that we see around because our deal flow has been over the last 3 years where we have been active, or 3 or 4 years, in excess of 270 water innovators. So it's quite interesting to see what's going on in the marketplace, and it's indicative of a shift. So we'll end up with that. So to begin with, maybe with a little bit on Water Unite, why this investment vehicle is interesting, if not unique. It is a blended finance vehicle. It was put together by a charity called Water Unite, based in the UK. It's a non-profit organization that decided to channel private funds from donors, particularly corporate donors. That's the audience by and large, to invest into innovators rather than just support grassroots organizations. So they decided to set up a fund called Water Unite Impact that does something like 90% of the funds collected in the form of investing into innovative companies, early stage in the global south. The purpose is to channel corporate donations to impact investing. So basically a shift from philanthropy to active philanthropy to investing. And our two rationale, the first one is investing in companies is more efficient than using just grants, and also the fact that second, that impact enterprises are more powerful to solve problems at the grassroots level. And this is built together for a purpose. I think you have an animation coming next where the expected outcome is an impact multiple, as we call it, which is the compounded effect of having the same dollar rotating several times over, which is, donors' money going into, enterprises that can repay the money, and the same money gets reinvested again. And the fact that they go into high growth enterprises with intentionality to grow their impacts alongside their commercial scale, and hence producing more impact. So the compounded effect of A and B together produce a demultiplication of the number of impacts invested. So that's pretty much what we're looking to do, is to leverage, a large amount of impact with, the first dollar, or i.e., the first investment money tipping more private investors coming on side as well, and which is the blended finance model I'm going to talk about. So on the next page, why I think, working with corporations is, for me, particularly attractive. And that's why I was drawn to the model in the first place. Corporations are the ultimate patient investor. We're talking about, patient capital in the realm of impact investing, but actually corporations have a longer lens. They are able to invest long term, and with resilient expectations as far as returns are concerned, and certainly more than institutional investors. Two, they are problem solvers. They need to solve problems around water scarcity. The use of water in the industry is massive, and this is perhaps the last unregulated territory in a sense that we don't measure our water footprint today. It is something that we expect is going to change massively in the next decade or 2 decades, because we will have the means to do that. And with the means to do that come together with, comes the ability to change the way you do manage water as a rare resource. So it's important. Water is key. There's water intensity, more or less, but massively into energy, food, electronics, the rise of AI and internet, and together with AI is actually increasing the pressure massively. So water efficiency is needed, and by and large, water footprint is off the map in corporate dashboards. So that's the reason why they're interested, and they are looking for more solutions. Next page. Well, actually, what problems are they trying to solve? Yes, obviously, we know that there is a very large gap in water and sanitation, to the tune of 1 billion plus. There's also insufficient coverage in terms of infrastructure, but also, of course, water stress, which is coming high on the agenda everywhere of governments and corporations. So those are the key problems everybody's facing, and that chiefly corporates are responsible to manage properly. So the outcome of all these pressure points will be responded by innovation, and we expect there's going to be a huge wave in innovation in water. It goes way beyond wash. We expect, and this is figures by the World Resource Institute, a demultiplication of investment in the next decade by 2034. An increase by the factor of 3,000x. So we'll discuss that later, but already we have good exposure to that. We are through the investments that we are making. So far we have a portfolio of 6 investments. That's going to be 12 in the next 12 to 18 months. And the sort of innovations we see, it's everything we know already, boosted by AI, enabling a large productivity gap to be closed. The rise of mini infrastructure, going into the gaps where large infrastructure are actually fading. The rise of circularity everywhere, not just in water, but water particularly. With that, circularity in waste management, with waste to energy, and a lot of water preservation potential that is so far really untapped. So I want to talk about the blended finance model next and introduce the inner working of Water Unite Impact as an investment vehicle. So what you can see on this picture is that Water Unite Impact, which is the bar in the middle, is actually fed by Water Unite, which is what we call the non-profit fund here, which is in fact contributed by corporate donors by and large. And so those are corporations interested in reducing their water footprint, and that's the reason why they come with us. And then the second instance, we have private investors coming in as well. These private investors are largely de-risked by the fact that we have a large amount of blended finance money together, and that helps producing a first loss tranche, as well as other blended finance interesting impacts that I will detail in the next page. All that money is channeled to it's called SMEs here, but actually it's channeled to startup companies, and the effect is to accelerate companies where it's needed to have additionality finance. So the blended finance model itself has 3 pillars. One is basically the first loss guarantee, which is nothing else but, in fact, sum of money left aside for indemnification of capital losses if they occur. The reason we have that is, and this is a difference with a classic private equity fund, is that donors choose to give money across the years, and that exceeds the investment period. So we still receive money after the deployment period, which enables us to provide that, which is an interesting feature, perhaps very, very different. Second is there's a first layer of equity financing that goes into financing, the early stage part of the investment portfolio, which by nature is early stage because these innovations only start to emerge. So if you look at the pool of investable opportunities, it's largely early, okay, in the development curve. So we can invest and mobilize capital here below the hurdle rate, which helps other LPs joining in later, in fact, de-risk their own investment. And the third pillar is providing technical assistance to companies. And it is also a de-risking mechanism in a sense, because we provide support and assistance to companies until they reach a break-even, or even beyond break-even, or even beyond break-even in the case companies are actually past break-even when we invest. And that's terribly important, and it can make a massive difference if it's well applied to businesses at that stage of development, okay, between failure and success, or between success and more success. So those are the three pillars we use to define our blended finance model. Next page. I want to show you the stages in which we have actually mobilized capital. And in fact, it shows that, having a blended finance core at the center of the fund is helpful to mobilize further capital. So the first layer is actually provided by Water Unite itself and private investors along with Water Unite. So you can click on the first animation that actually shows who they are. So we have Water Unite. In fact, we're lucky to have the One Foundation. That's a fairly well-known and respected non-profit organization in the UK that has like 15 years of experience at the grassroots level in Africa, and they decided to promote the model doing impact investing as a next stage. The second layer is a group of corporates. So we call that a group of sustainability leaders or water sustainability leaders because they are preoccupied by the issues and want to respond actively through innovation. So we have two core donors who are historic in this development. First is the Co-op, which is the largest cooperative of retailers or retailing cooperative in the UK. Which is a major, brand of and chain of supermarkets across the country. And then we have Elior, which is a large European listed on a Eurostock catering organization. And together behind them, we have a number of brands in the food and drink industry associated to them. And they all provide funds through what we call micro-levy programs. So what's a micro-levy? Is you buy a bottle of water at the supermarket, there will be 1 penny put aside to go into the fund. So in fact, this fund is actually contributed by a large number of consumers. And there's a direct relationship between what we do and as a value proposition to these people, expecting and having basically a contribution to the well-being of the planet through their consuming act. And first and last but not least is actually the private investors who we have been able to mobilize. So with the Development Finance Corporation of the US, that's committed 7.5 million, and around that we have others. One development institution specialized in water. He's also on board with us with a second first loss guarantee mechanism to be put in place. And other private investors include family offices, private foundations, and corporates. At this stage, the fund has about 20 million commitments, looking to grow to 30 million in 2025, with a program to grow ultimately to 60 million, and perhaps do a second vehicle after that. And we have a large interest by a good number of organizations in private institutions and development finance institutions as well, who are talking to us and looking into what we do. Next is basically private capital. What are they looking for? So I'd already touched on that a little bit, but I think more specifically, they want SDG alignments through innovative solutions to reduce or enhance better use of water. This has a good impact on their corporate social responsibility strategy that is actually brought to the next level from just philanthropy to investing. And investing is actually producing this impact multiple. So it brings more energy into what they do by way of corporate social responsibility. They're of course after the impact multiple. There's also an ESG booster because, in fact, they can develop partnerships and pilots, which is something we promote between our investees and those corporates, so they can actually use these pilots to propel good practice down the supply chain and effectively try and mark up what good progress can be made by these and others across their operations. And the final point is actually important for them. It's to enhance marketing value by storytelling that brings scholars to their value proposition. I talked about this when I talked about the retailers and the consumer products through the retailing network we work with. And so the final point is actually helping social enterprises themselves. So those are, enterprises with there's a massive financial gap at the bottom on the ground when you invest in emerging markets. So this is one of the first objective for the fund is to bring additionality there. As a missing middle player, we are happy to play a critical role in funding what's going to become larger by way of innovation. And so I take the example of Jibo, a company that has developed now a network of 10,000 retailers across 7 countries of Africa, or 8 countries now, with about 210 production points, servicing like hundreds of thousands of people, and that's millions of liters of water per year. Now, the scale of impact that Jibo has generated of the last 10 years can actually be multiplied by 5 to 10 in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Or actually even in the next 5 years, we hope. So, the scale of that is massive, and it is actually disruptive in the existing modes and ways to distribute clean water. So it's important that we are able to help radical innovation early in the early stage, so that effectively it has a transformational effect later. There's a mix of capital and technical assistance, which is also important for them. Of course, they use the blended finance model to de-risk as well, and interested as well, of course, in connections with strategic partners that we are well placed to nurture and to promote in the first place within our coalition of corporate partners. So that was the part 2, I believe. Now, investing in a water gap is really what I want to talk about to expand, the picture on what is it that actually is going on in the marketplace. So to begin with, let's talk about, water and the place of water in the economy. It's largely invisible, but it's massive. When you look at the core here, 1 trillion of water treatments, that's the water business, plus another about 2 trillion in equipment. But it's actually 20 trillion in water handling economy. The important figure is water-dependent activities are as much as 86 trillion, and that's about 80%, in fact, that you will show in the next animation. 80% of the global economy, in fact, narrowly depends on water. So that raises 2 questions. One is, what is the value at risk here in relation with the notion of second question, how much do we need to boost water security? Those key notions I want to discuss next. So on the next page, you see a graph here given to us by the Global Water Intelligence in 2024, which is a projection of the risk that we are facing in the next decade, 2024-2014, from the direct impacts of climate impacts in association with water. And that says that basically they expect a loss of 1.8 trillion in 10 years. Which is, of course, significant. But the value at risk is bigger than that, because some of these events actually exceed the headroom, and we expect something like as much as 3 trillion, which is material, because about 3% of the global economy today, as it is today. And of course, if you want to erect a wall to protect all these the economy against these happenings, this is an important and material investment, which is also an opportunity for innovation and development. On the next page, I think we want to understand the pressure points. So first, food is at risk because of water scarcity. So The population in the world is a jump of 2x from billion in the 1990s, beginning to 1990s, to plus 10 billion in 2050. So that is obviously that has the demographic. That demographic has an impact on the resources. The diet is changing as well, and the model is more agro-intensive, and the agro-intensive model as well has a direct impact on depleting resources, not the least water table and soils. Second, I think energy is wholly reliant on water. So there's a massive amount of water intensity in cooling for coal, for nuclear energy, and biofuels. And that has not been put into question in terms of how it is made, how much water you need. So basically, by and large, we'll still behave as if water was a free resource and abundant enough to do all that. But actually, we are hitting the ceiling now at the moment. And this is, of course, expected to grow massively in the next decades. The third impact is industrialization, where water intensity is massive. The single use of water is largely predominant. When you look at the water recycling in the average, in EU average, less than 1%, but it is 90% in Israel. And in countries where there's already water stress, is 30%, like in Spain, also part of the EU, but way above the average. So we expect more and more pressure, particularly due to the rise of data centers. Now we're building data centers at a pace of about one every 3 days, which is actually the largest, stacking up of capital expenditures that we've seen even since the first industrial revolution. So that is super important, and actually constitutes a cause for concern on from the viewpoint of water depletion and water pressure. And of course, urbanization comes as well as another pressure point on water resources and biodiversity, also due to water intensity in construction and the multiplicity of single-use water usage. So all these pressure points are leading to what we can see on the next page, pain points, in fact, on the water. So exercising pressure from not enough water to too much water, limited access to water, and water toxicity. All of these pain points create problems, but problems call solutions. So let's look at the solutions in a bit more detail, which is what actually constitutes an opportunity for us to invest into innovation. So, in fact, we'll see an issue with obsolescence and replacement, where there's, innovation coming up to replace the existing models. Next animation shows that, the existing infrastructure is going to be boosted by IoT. So we can see that on the ground already happening, with a reduction of capital expenditures, pressure, and also reduction of working capital requirement. For example, reduction of non-revenue water, all that is helping massively. Also gaps to be filled by mini infrastructure. So those are also another constituent in a wave of innovation. As well, we see private systems starting to exist. Sometimes it's just lightweight or asset light innovation to increase water security, increase water efficiency, and contribute to something which would be called a water net zero, on a pattern similar to what we see with carbon. And that constitutes an opportunity to invest in what we see, i.e. emerging models that are still early in the curve of innovation, and but set to replace obsolescent or maturing solutions that are around in place at the moment. So this is a good time to start investing in water, because basically we're moving off just water seen as utilities to water seen transversely, with a lot of systems and innovations in place they actually come in the value chains. So as a result, there's an unprecedented growth in water investment between now and 2034. You can see on that picture, which is a set of data from the Water Intelligence or the Global Water Institute. So there'll be an increase in public and private water and sanitation by a multiple of 2, irrigation and water rights by a multiple of 2, financial investment in the water sector by a multiple of 5. So you can see mobilization of capital becoming more important. But very interesting and strikingly here, what you see is increase in investments in water efficiency. Next animation, please. Two steps. In industry and agriculture. And so the multiple is staggering with 3,200. So what you see is innovation, driving a lot of investment in public-private partnership or in public sector classic utilities on the increase, but also driving a lot of private sector investment in the industry itself, in the electronics, in everything, energy, etc., to actually resolve the problem of too much water intensity, too high water security, and too high water footprint, to change everything around how we use water. And that's on the next page, please. So looking at innovation, we start with the first pain point: not enough water. The problems, we know them, are growing water stress, loss of yields, loss of biodiversity, lack of potable water, etc., etc. The solutions is more reuse and recycling, harvesting, water preservation, mini infrastructure, improved irrigation, desalination. So all that comes together, as a combination of different solutions, and/or these innovations acting in isolation. Okay, there's a number of there's a large amount of challenges around that we need to address still. Associated with energy intensity, byproducts that are polluting, like brine and desalination industry. There's a need for capital intensity, so there's a need for accelerating in the water sector, and of course, and by and large, and this is where we are playing, there's a need to actually bridge early stage innovation. Okay, to accelerate that, to gain scale and de-risk those investments. On the next page is about too much water, and of course, this is kind of things we know already, with flash floods, insufficient surface, inadequate urban infrastructure, saturation, drainage, insufficient emergency response. The solutions are around adapting urban space, different equipment, some water retention in the good places, but also water evacuation in other places. This can be massively enabled by artificial intelligence to help prevention and crisis resolution in places. Now, there are challenges, of course, in that it's around the inadaptation of the existing urban model, and infrastructure, but also the modes of developing and structuring public-private partnerships are actually adapted for large infrastructure, but much less for low-scale mini infra or micro infra. But that's needed as well if we want to answer to these and mobilize capital more actively. So on the limited access to water, the issue is really accessing water for large population on the planet, the fact that there's a growing demand on water resources, the fact that groundwater extraction is actually increasing with no substitution in places, because it will be digging deep, water cooling as well is on the increase as a result of actually more investment into energy, which is needed elsewhere. But obviously, we need to change the systems by which. So the solutions around that are, again, mini infrastructure, the rise of, things like the water kiosk I mentioned with Jibo, other drinking water distribution alternatives as well. increasing water recycling and circularity around water is something that has a potential application on a very large scale, and alternatives cooling systems. Okay. The challenges are, again, to accelerate innovation, to scale existing solutions, and attract more private capital. So that's what we do with the model. You do that more effectively with a blended finance model indeed as well, but we need to continue working up the supply chain to be able to keep working with the existing investments that we have that are scaling up fast, but also catch and help through basically by the force of example, but also by the force of what we do, attract further capital to be able to do that on a larger scale as well. And the final point is about water toxicity. Final but important problems, we know them are, a lot of wastewater is untreated, so it ends up in the waterways with eutrophication and dead water as a result. So that's actually a massive problem in the loss of biodiversity. A lot of people are at risk here, above 3 billion people. The water leaks as well is massive, 43% in water pipes. That is an issue in intoxication of networks as well as a result. And in many parts of the world where water is actually high in temperature and high enough to develop bacteria, it is creating problems which makes the water pipe networks unreliable in terms of health and safety. 20% of the water ecosystems are under pressure. This is what I said about eutrophication already. So the solutions there are, close the infrastructure gap, which means basically the infrastructure are not covering, so the coverage is not enough. So we see a solution into mini infra as well with that. More waste water treatment systems that are perhaps less energy intensive, enabling to decarbonate the treatment of water as well. More recycling, particularly the treatment of toxic waste and sludge. That's kind of still an issue, and that is an area of innovation as well. And working on the existing infrastructure with resolving the gap in, for example, water leakage. So the challenges are the same. We need to boost productivity of existing systems, sustain innovation, enhance existing innovation, mobilize further capital. There's a decarbonation of the management of wastewater. So wastewater is actually one chief responsible for emission of greenhouse gases today. So the shift will take some time, but these innovations will come to the rescue effectively. So we see that there's going to be a massive push in the next decade on that, as exemplified and illustrated by the World Resource Institute prediction. So to finish, just go back a little bit on Water Unite Impact. Our investment thesis has 5 pillars. One is actually access to clean drinking water, because it's still a problem for large population, above 1 billion. 2 is closing the gap with hygiene and sanitation, because similarly, there's a massive gap here in the provision of services and good standards that doesn't reach everybody, and there's still a gap in excess of 1 billion here to do. Wastewater circularity as a solution to, or set of solutions to manage wastewater and pollution. Also associated with that plastics, plastics and solid waste circularity, to actually remove all these toxics and pollutants out of the water system and out of the waterways. And finally, water preservation, which is what Mira, who's going to talk next, is working on with, it's a good example of applying, artificial intelligence to irrigation. And in their case, they've managed to reduce water by a margin, by a fact of 20 or 30%, 20 to 30% in the experiments they've done, helping farmers reduce the amount of water they use and simply basically make savings on water. So this is Amira and CBEX. Now, Jibo is our investment working in the access to clean water. I already mentioned that. Sanivation is one of the companies actively working on plugging the infrastructure gap in Kenya in association with wastewater and toilets. GRI is also active in a in that case, they work in Southeast Asia. They work on, but increasingly as well as elsewhere in Africa. They work with large corporates to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane coming out of out of wastewater. They transform wastewater into biogas. So actually they turn something that is a cost center into a profit center, but also generate energy out of the organic content of water, generate carbon offsets as well. So it's a win-win solution for everybody. In the plastics, we've got Mr. Green Africa. That's one of the most advanced company in recycling plastics in Africa. Or they operate a network of waste pickers with a very clean solution where waste pickers are put actually into formal employment, and then they build a circular economy on recycling plastics, working with large FMCGs like Unilever, like others, Colgate, etc. In order to produce them with recycled plastics and contribute to the pledge to reduce virgin plastic by 50% by 2035. And the next investment we have in plastics is a company that does bioplastics using agricultural residues to replace single-use plastics in the food and drink industry. They work currently with the largest brewing companies in the world, like Unilever, like Diageo, like Ebbie and Bev, like Orson Moores in the US, but also a host of a large number of smaller, independent brewers that they service with products that are actually bioplastics, but replacing single-use plastics, or by the same having an effect on reducing the amount of waste going out into the oceans. And finally, last but not least, Seabex is almost a tee off for you, Amira, to continue the discussion, but you'll discover what Seabex does. It's actually very, very good. So to finish, what I want to say, I think we have a last box coming in. Yes, this fund is now 20 million committed. 50% of that is blended finance source. We are in a process of raising another 10 million in 2025, almost there. And to date, it's like 6 investments. So it's tiny because we've actually deployed like small tickets below, around 500,000 per investments. So that's 2.2 million deployed, but it actually represents a much larger ticket size, and it does represent also another 12 million to go in the same portfolio, potentially plus new investments. We will be doing at least another 6 investments in the next year and a half to complete the portfolio. We target relatively high MOIC above the 3x, which equates to a 16% annualized return. That's what we want to do, because the companies that, thanks to the blended finance model, obviously, but also the companies we invest into have a very large growth multiple. We can expect them to grow by a factor of 5 to 10 in the next decade and before that. So we think that it is safe to go on a regular venture capital target for this, because these companies, some will exceed the 3x, some others will do. So that was the presentation of what we do. I'm happy to take your questions. Perhaps we can do that at the back end of the presentation. But thank you very much for your attention now.